because he wasn't talking just to be talking. I felt he was also coming straight because there was a big
Knight's allegations center on Keefe D, whose trial for Shocker's murder was initially slated for March 2025, but was abruptly delayed to February 2026 after his legal team claimed to have uncovered new evidence that could exonerate him. This evidence, reportedly pulled from old LAPD files, hints at uncharged individuals involved in the ambush that claimed Shocker's life. Knight's assertion that Snoop has been financially supporting Keefe D's bail efforts adds a chilling layer to the story. He suggests Snoop is desperate to keep Keefe D quiet, implying that the rapper knows more about the events of that fateful night in Las Vegas than he has ever admitted. The accusation transforms what might have been dismissed as prison gossip into a provocative challenge to Snoop's carefully curated public image. The roots of this conflict trace back to the mid-1990s, when Death Row Records was the epicenter of West Coast rap, a powerhouse driven by Suge Knight's iron grip and the talents of artists like Snoop Dogg and Tupac Shakur. In 1995, Snoop was riding high, his debut album Doggy Style still resonating in clubs across America, and his acquittal in a homicide trial cementing his untouchable status. But the landscape shifted dramatically when Knight paid a $1.4 million bail to secure Shocker's release from Clinton Correctional Facility. Shocker's arrival at Death Row was a seismic event, repositioning the label's orbit from Snoop's laid-back charisma to Shocker's fiery intensity. Snoop, who had been the label's cornerstone, found himself overshadowed, a shift he later acknowledged with a mix of resentment and resignation on Logan Paul's Impulsive podcast in 2022. He described feeling displaced, admitting that Shocker's presence changed everything. The tension between Snoop and Shocker was palpable, though it wasn't always hostile. They collaborated on tracks like two of America's Most Wanted, projecting unity in their red-suited defiance. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming. Shocker, paranoid and fiercely loyal, was consumed by the East Coast-West Coast feud, convinced that rivals like the Notorious B.I.G. and Sean Puffy Combs were plotting against him. Snoop, by contrast, preferred diplomacy, a stance that became a flashpoint when he appeared on New York's Hot 97 in September 1996 and praised Biggie and Puffy. To Shocker, this was betrayal, a public alignment with the enemy. Knight recalls Shocker's fury, quoting him as saying, "I put everybody on death row. I put everyone on my album, and now this dude gets on the radio and says he's riding with them." The friendship disintegrated, setting the stage for the tragedy that followed. On September 7, 1996, after a Mike Tyson fight at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, Shocker was gunned down in a drive-by shooting while riding in a car driven by Knight. 4 bullets struck Shocker, who died 6 days later. The official narrative points to a Southside Crip named Orlando Anderson as the shooter, allegedly in retaliation for a brawl earlier that night. But Knight's recent claims shift the focus to Snoop, suggesting he had foreknowledge of the attack. A particularly damning detail comes from Warren G., Snoop's longtime ally, who revealed on a 2023 episode of Drink Champs that Snoop was in Los Angeles that night, listening to a Nextel radio, a device used exclusively by Death Row's security team. Warren described Snoop receiving real-time updates from Las Vegas, including news of Shocker's shooting. Knight seizes on this, arguing that Snoop had no legitimate reason to be tuned into a secure channel used by the label's protective detail. The implication is explosive. If Snoop was privy to the convoy's communications, was he also aware of the shooter's plans? The Nextel detail is critical because these two-way radios were not consumer gadgets. In the 1990s, they were specialized devices used for private networks, often by security teams coordinating high-stakes operations. Knight insists that the shooters communicated via this channel, with a voice allegedly saying "got it" as the shots rang out. If Snoop was listening, as Warren G's account suggests, it places him uncomfortably close to the moment of the murder, even from 270 miles away. This raises questions about who else was on that frequency and what they knew. Knight's narrative paints a picture of a calculated setup, with Snoop potentially orchestrating or at least aware of the ambush. The timing of Knight's accusations aligns with developments in Keefe D's case. In 2023, Las Vegas police unsealed a warrant naming Keefe D as the orchestrator of Shocker's murder, alleging he coordinated a $1 million bounty tied to the hit. Knight now ties this bounty to Snoop, claiming he was involved in back-channel efforts to secure Keefe D's silence. The postponement of Keefe D's trial, coupled with his defense team's discovery of new evidence, fuels speculation that the case could implicate others within Death Row's inner circle. Knight's decision to speak out now via his podcast Collect Call suggests he's positioning himself as a truth teller before the trial exposes more. Snoop's acquisition of Death Row Records in 2022 adds another layer to this saga. For many, it was a triumphant reclamation, a full-circle moment for an artist who rose to fame under the label's banner. Priced at an estimated $50 million, the deal was celebrated as Snoop's victory lap, transforming him into a mogul who could resurrect the brand. But tonight, it's a betrayal, a move by a man who profited from Shocker's death and now seeks to control the narrative. Knight has publicly demanded to see the sales paperwork, accusing Snoop of fraud and claiming the label's legacy has been tarnished. His resentment is palpable, rooted in the belief that Snoop benefited from the chaos that followed Shocker's murder, while Knight himself lost everything: his freedom, his empire, and his place in hip-hop history. The personal dynamics between Knight, Snoop, and Shocker are as complex as the conspiracy itself. Snoop has often spoken of his grief over Shocker's death, recounting a hospital visit where he fainted from the weight of the loss. On Impulsive, he described holding Shocker's hand, urging him to hold on, a story that paints him as a heartbroken friend. But Knight disputes this, asserting that Snoop never visited the hospital, accusing him of fabricating the moment for public sympathy. This contradiction is stark. One man claims a visceral, emotional connection to the tragedy, while the other calls it a lie designed to sanitize a guilty conscience. The truth, as always, lies in the murky space between their accounts. Knight's narrative is further complicated by his history of provocative claims. Over the years, he's pointed fingers at everyone from Puffy to the LAPD, even suggesting in 2014 that Shocker might still be alive, living on an island somewhere. These theories, often dismissed as outlandish, gain traction in the context of hip-hop's conspiracy-laden culture. For instance, Michael Nice, a former security officer, claimed in 2018 that he helped smuggle Shocker to Cuba, only to die days before he could provide proof. More recently, in 2025, investigator Jimmy Poole posted photos allegedly showing an older Shocker alive and well. While these stories strain credulity, they underscore the persistent uncertainty surrounding Shocker's death and the motives of those involved. Snoop's defenders argue that Knight's accusations are the desperate acts of a man clinging to relevance. Incarcerated since 2018 on a 28-year sentence for voluntary manslaughter, Knight has used his podcast to air grievances and rewrite his legacy. His feud with Snoop intensified after the Death Row sale, with Knight accusing him of destroying the label's spirit. But the specificity of his latest claims, particularly the Nextel radio and the alleged warning to Daz Dillinger not to travel to Vegas, lends them a weight that's hard to dismiss outright. If Snoop knew something was going to happen, as Knight alleges, it suggests a level of complicity that would upend his legacy as a beloved cultural icon.